I sat at my desk, staring at the bank statement in front of me. My eyes widened as I saw the total amount of debt my grandson had accumulated. $120,000. I couldn't believe it. How had it come to this? I thought back to the last time I saw my grandson. He had ignored me for 8 years, and I had no idea why. But now, I knew I had to reach out to him. I had always been a proud man, but seeing that bank statement made me realize that I had been too proud. I had let my ego get in the way of my relationship with my grandson. I picked up the phone and dialed my grandson's number. It rang several times before he finally answered. "Hello," he said, sounding distant. "Hey, it's your grandfather," I said, trying to sound calm. "I need to talk to you about something." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What is it?" he asked, sounding uninterested. "I saw your bank statement," I said, getting straight to the point. "I know you're in debt. $120,000 is a lot of money. What's going on?" There was another pause, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up on me. But then he spoke. "I don't know, Grandpa. I just got in over my head. I'm trying to pay it off, but it's hard." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and my heart went out to him. "Okay, well, we'll figure it out together," I said. "But first, you need to come live with me." There was a long pause, and I could sense his hesitation. "I don't know, Grandpa," he said finally. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Nonsense," I said firmly. "You're coming to live with me, and we're going to get you out of this debt. Together." I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, but I knew I had to be firm. I had to take a stand and fight for my family's future. And so, I waited for him to arrive, my heart racing with anticipation. What would happen next? Only time would tell. I waited for what felt like an eternity for my grandson to arrive. I had expected him to be resistant to the idea of living with me, but I had hoped that he would see the sense in it. As the hours ticked by, I found myself growing more and more anxious. What if he didn't show up? What if he had changed his mind? I tried to distract myself by busying around the house, but my mind kept wandering back to my grandson. I thought about all the things I wanted to say to him, all the things I wanted to do to help him. I wanted to sit him down and have a long talk with him about his finances, about his life choices. I wanted to help him come up with a plan to pay off his debt and get back on his feet. But as the hours turned into days, I began to lose hope. Maybe he had decided not to come after all. Maybe he had found another way out of his debt, another solution that didn't involve me. I was sitting in my armchair, staring blankly at the TV, when I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that it must be my grandson. I quickly got up and made my way to the door, trying to compose myself as I went. I opened the door to find my grandson standing on the porch, looking nervous and unsure of himself. He was carrying a small suitcase and looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey," he said, looking up at me with a mixture of fear and defiance in his eyes. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound calm and welcoming. "Come on in." I stepped aside to let him in, and he walked past me into the house. I closed the door behind him and followed him into the living room. "So," I said, trying to break the ice. "How was your trip?" He shrugged. "It was fine, I guess." I nodded. "Well, I'm glad you're here. We've got a lot to talk about." He nodded, looking down at his feet. I sat down in my armchair, motioning for him to take a seat on the couch. "So," I said, trying to get straight to the point. "Tell me about this debt of yours. How did you get into so much trouble?" He looked up at me, a mixture of shame and defiance in his eyes. "I don't know," he said. "I just got in over my head, I guess. I was trying to make some extra money, and I got in with some people who promised me a lot of cash. But it turned out to be a scam, and now I owe them a lot of money." I nodded, trying to process what he was telling me. "I see," I said. "And you've been trying to pay them off, but it's not working out?" He shook his head. "No, it's not. I've been paying them what I can, but it's not enough. They're still coming after me, wanting more and more money. I nodded, feeling a surge of anger towards the people who had taken advantage of my grandson. Well, I said. We'll figure something out. We'll get you out of this debt, and we'll make sure those people can't hurt you again. He looked up at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Really, he said. You'll help me? I nodded. Of course I will, I said. You're my grandson. I'll do whatever it takes to help you. He nodded, looking down at his feet again. Thanks, Grandpa, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. We were going to get through this, together. We were going to pay off his debt and start fresh. But as I looked at my grandson, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He seemed nervous and on edge, like he was hiding something from me. And then it hit me, the realization that he might be in more trouble than I had initially thought. That he might be in danger. My heart started racing as I thought about all the possibilities. What if the people he owed money to were not just any ordinary creditors? What if they were dangerous, violent people who would stop at nothing to get their money? I looked at my grandson, trying to read his expression. Was he in danger? Was he hiding something from me? I knew I had to find out. I had to get to the bottom of this and make sure my grandson was safe. Hey, I said, trying to sound calm. Can I ask you something? He looked up at me, a mixture of fear and uncertainty in his eyes. What is it? He said. I took a deep breath. Are you in danger? I asked. Are the people you owe money to, are they dangerous? He hesitated, looking around the room nervously. And then he nodded, his eyes locked on mine. Yes, he said. They're very dangerous. I felt a chill run down my spine as I processed what my grandson had just told me. What do you mean they're very dangerous? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My grandson hesitated, looking around the room nervously again. I don't know if I should tell you, Grandpa, he said. I don't want you to get involved. It's not safe. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. I'm already involved, kiddo, I said. I'm your grandfather, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect you. Now, tell me what's going on. My grandson took a deep breath, and then he started talking. I owe money to a man named Victor, he said. He's a loan shark, and he's been threatening me for months. He says if I don't pay him back, he'll hurt me. And not just me, he'll hurt my family too. I felt a surge of anger at the thought of this Victor character threatening my grandson. We'll take care of him, I said. We'll pay him off, and then we'll make sure he never bothers you again. My grandson shook his head. It's not that simple, Grandpa, he said. Victor is a powerful man. He has connections all over the city, and he's not afraid to use violence to get what he wants. I gritted my teeth, determination burning inside me. We'll figure something out, I said. We'll get you out of this mess, no matter what it takes. My grandson nodded, looking a little more hopeful. But I could tell he was still scared, and I couldn't blame him. I was scared too. As we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Victor or one of his goons lurking in the shadows. But there was never anyone there. Still, the feeling persisted. I knew I had to do something to protect my grandson, but I didn't know what. I didn't know who Victor was, or what kind of resources he had at his disposal. All I knew was that I had to be careful. I had to be smart. And I had to be ready for anything. As the night wore on, I found myself becoming more and more agitated. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was Victor, and what he might do to my grandson. I knew I had to take action, but I didn't know what to do. And then, just as I was starting to feel like I was going to lose my mind, I heard a knock at the door. It was a soft knock, almost tentative. And it was followed by a low voice, whispering my name. Grandpa? My heart skipped a beat as I realized who it must be. My grandson. He had gotten up in the middle of the night and was now standing outside my bedroom door. "What is it, kiddo?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause, and then my grandson spoke up. "I think we should leave," he said. "I think we should get out of here before Victor finds us." I felt a surge of fear at his words. What did he mean? Had Victor already found us? Was he outside, waiting for us? I threw off the covers and got out of bed, my heart racing with anticipation. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We quickly packed a few bags, and then we slipped out of the house, into the night. I didn't know where we were going, or what we would do when we got there. All I knew was that we had to get out of there, before it was too late. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Victor or one of his goons lurking in the shadows. But there was never anyone there. Still, the feeling persisted. And then, just as we were turning a corner, I saw a figure standing in the distance. It was a man, tall and imposing, with a menacing scowl on his face. And as I looked at him, I knew. It was Victor. My heart skipped a beat as I saw Victor standing in the distance. I quickly grabbed my grandson's arm and pulled him close, trying to shield him from the man's gaze. "What do we do?" my grandson whispered, his eyes fixed on Victor. I didn't know what to say. I had been trying to avoid this moment, but now it seemed inevitable. Victor had found us. I looked around frantically, trying to find a way out. We were in a quiet neighborhood, with no one around. We were alone, and Victor was closing in. I knew we had to move fast. I quickly scanned our surroundings, looking for a place to hide. That's when I saw it, a small alleyway between two buildings. It was narrow and dark, but it might just provide us with the cover we needed. I quickly pulled my grandson towards the alleyway, trying to move as quietly as possible. We slipped into the alleyway just as Victor was about to reach us. I held my breath, listening to see if Victor had followed us. At first, there was silence. But then, I heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the alleyway. Victor had followed us. I quickly pulled my grandson deeper into the alleyway, trying to find a place to hide. The alleyway was narrow and winding, with trash cans and crates stacked up against the walls. I quickly scanned our surroundings, looking for a place to hide. That's when I saw it, a small dumpster with a lid that was slightly ajar. I quickly pulled my grandson towards the dumpster, trying to squeeze us both inside. We barely fit, but I managed to get the lid closed just as Victor reached the alleyway. I held my breath, listening to see if Victor had found us. The silence was oppressive, and I could feel my grandson's heart racing against mine. I knew we had to stay quiet, or risk being discovered. But as I listened, I realized that Victor was not alone. I could hear the sound of multiple footsteps echoing through the alleyway. Victor had brought backup. I felt a surge of fear as I realized the danger we were in. We were trapped, with no way out. And Victor was closing in. I held my grandson close, trying to comfort him. But I knew I couldn't protect him forever. Eventually, Victor would find us. And when he did, I knew we would be in grave danger. As we waited, I could hear the sound of Victor's men searching the alleyway. They were moving slowly, methodically, making sure they didn't miss us. I knew it was only a matter of time before they found us. And when they did, I knew we would have to fight for our lives. I looked at my grandson, trying to prepare him for what was to come. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Fear. My grandson was terrified. And I knew I had to do something to protect him. But what? As I looked around, I realized that we were running out of options. We were trapped, with no way out. And Victor was closing in. I knew I had to think fast, or risk losing my grandson forever. But as I thought, I realized that there was one thing I could do. One thing that might just save our lives. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was to come. And then, I made my move. I slowly opened the dumpster lid, trying not to make a sound. I peeked out, looking around to see if Victor's men were nearby. I saw one of them, about 20 feet away, searching through a nearby trash can. I quickly ducked back inside, my heart racing with fear. I knew we had to get out of there, and fast. I looked at my grandson, trying to come up with a plan. We couldn't stay in the dumpster forever, and eventually Victor's men would find us. I thought back to my days in the military, trying to remember any tactics that might help us escape. That's when I remembered something, a technique called clearing a room. It was a method used to quickly and safely enter a room, searching for any potential threats. I knew it was a long shot, but it was worth a try. I looked at my grandson, trying to explain the plan. "Okay, kiddo, here's what we're going to do," I whispered. "We're going to sneak out of the dumpster, and then we're going to make a run for it. We'll try to find a safe place to hide, and then we'll call for help." My grandson nodded, looking scared but determined. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was to come. We slowly opened the dumpster lid, peeking out to see if the coast was clear. The man searching the trash can was still there, but he was now about 30 feet away. I nodded to my grandson, and we both slipped out of the dumpster, trying to move as quietly as possible. We quickly scanned our surroundings, looking for any potential threats. I saw a few more of Victor's men, but they were all too far away to pose an immediate threat. I nodded to my grandson, and we both started to run. We sprinted down the alleyway, our feet pounding the pavement. I could hear Victor's men shouting behind us, but I didn't dare look back. I kept my eyes fixed on the end of the alleyway, trying to find a safe place to hide. We finally reached the end of the alleyway, and I quickly pulled my grandson into a nearby doorway. We both leaned against the door, trying to catch our breath. I looked around, trying to get my bearings. We were in a busy part of town, with lots of people around. I knew we had to find a safe place to hide, and fast. That's when I saw it, a small coffee shop, just across the street. I nodded to my grandson, and we both sprinted across the street, trying to blend in with the crowd. We pushed open the door, slipping inside just as Victor's men were about to catch up to us. I quickly locked the door behind us, trying to catch my breath. We had made it, at least for now. But I knew Victor's men would be back, and next time we might not be so lucky. I looked at my grandson, trying to reassure him. "We're safe now, kiddo," I said. "We'll call for help, and then we'll get out of here." My grandson nodded, looking scared but relieved. I quickly pulled out my phone, trying to call for help. But as I looked at the screen, my heart sank. I had no signal. We were trapped, with no way to call for help. And Victor's men were closing in. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing with worst-case scenarios. We were trapped in a small coffee shop, with no way to call for help. Victor's men could be outside, waiting for us to make a move. I looked around the coffee shop, trying to find a way to escape. There was a back door, but I knew it was probably guarded. I also knew that we couldn't stay here forever. We had to come up with a plan, and fast. I looked at my grandson, trying to think of something. He was looking at me, his eyes wide with fear. I knew I had to protect him, no matter what. I quickly scanned the coffee shop, looking for any potential tools. I saw a fire extinguisher on the wall, and I knew it might come in handy. I also saw a small kitchen, with a few sharp knives. I knew I could use those to defend us if necessary. But I also knew that we couldn't stay here forever. We had to come up with a plan to escape. I looked at my grandson, trying to think of something. And then, it hit me. I remembered a trick I had learned in the military, a way to escape from a small room. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. I looked at my grandson, trying to explain the plan. "Okay, kiddo, here's what we're going to do," I whispered. "We're going to make a break for the back door. I'll use the fire extinguisher to create a diversion, and then we'll make a run for it." My grandson nodded, looking scared but determined. I quickly grabbed the fire extinguisher, trying to prepare myself for what was to come. We slowly made our way to the back door, trying not to make a sound. I could hear Victor's men outside, talking and laughing. I knew they were waiting for us to make a move. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was to come. And then, I pulled the trigger on the fire extinguisher. A loud noise echoed through the coffee shop, and I knew it was time to move. We quickly opened the back door, and I used the fire extinguisher to create a smokescreen. We made a run for it, trying to escape into the night. But as we ran, I could hear Victor's men behind us, shouting and chasing after us. We were running for our lives, and I knew we had to keep moving. I looked at my grandson, trying to make sure he was okay. He was running beside me, his eyes wide with fear. I knew I had to protect him, no matter what. We ran through the streets, trying to find a safe place to hide. But I knew Victor's men were closing in, and we couldn't stay hidden forever. We had to come up with a new plan, and fast. And then, I saw it. A small taxicab, parked on the side of the street. I quickly grabbed my grandson, and we both jumped into the taxi. I slammed the door shut behind us, trying to catch my breath. We were safe, at least for now. But I knew Victor's men would be back, and next time we might not be so lucky. As we drove away from the coffee shop, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. We had made it out alive, and we were one step closer to putting Victor and his men behind us. But I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. We still had to find a way to take down Victor and his operation, and make sure they could never hurt us again. I looked over at my grandson, who was sitting in the back seat, looking pale and shaken. I knew he had been through a lot, and I felt a surge of anger towards Victor for putting him through this. But I also felt a sense of pride and admiration for my grandson's bravery. He had faced his fears and stood up to Victor, even when it seemed like all hope was lost. As we drove, I couldn't help but think about the journey we had been on. From the moment I had received that phone call from Victor, to the moment we had escaped from the coffee shop, it had been a wild and terrifying ride. But through it all, I had been driven by one thing: my love for my grandson. I knew that I would do anything to protect him, and that I would stop at nothing to make sure he was safe. And as we drove away from Victor and his men, I knew that I had finally found a way to do just that. We drove for hours, finally stopping at a small motel on the outskirts of town. I checked us in, making sure to use a fake name and pay in cash. I knew that Victor might still be looking for us, and I didn't want to take any chances. As we settled into our room, I looked over at my grandson and saw that he was finally starting to relax. He was lying on the bed, his eyes closed, and a small smile on his face. I knew that he was finally starting to feel safe, and that was all that mattered. I sat down next to him, putting my arm around him and pulling him close. "It's over," I whispered. "We're safe now. We'll never have to deal with Victor again." My grandson opened his eyes, looking up at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Grandpa," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I got you into this." I shook my head, hugging him tightly. "You didn't get me into anything, kiddo," I said. "I'm just glad I could be here for you. And I'm proud of you for standing up to Victor. You're a brave kid, and I know you'll always be able to take care of yourself." As we hugged, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that we had finally found closure, and that we could finally start to heal. But as we sat there, I couldn't help but think about Victor. I knew that he was still out there, and that he would probably never stop trying to hurt us. And I knew that I had to do something to stop him. I looked over at my grandson, who was still sitting next to me. "You know, kiddo," I said, "I think it's time we took matters into our own hands. We need to make sure Victor can never hurt us again." My grandson looked up at me, a fierce glint in his eye. "I'm with you, Grandpa," he said. "Let's do it." Together, we came up with a plan. We would gather evidence of Victor's crimes, and then we would take it to the authorities. We would make sure that he was brought to justice, and that he could never hurt us again. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And as we sat there, planning our next move, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. We were finally taking back control, and we were finally going to make Victor pay. It took weeks, but finally we had gathered enough evidence to take to the authorities. We went to the police station, where we met with a detective who was eager to hear our story. As we told him about Victor's crimes, I could see the anger and disgust in his eyes. He was determined to bring Victor to justice, and I knew that we had finally found an ally. Together, we worked with the detective to build a case against Victor. We gathered more evidence, and we worked with other witnesses to build a strong case. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Victor was brought into the courtroom, looking smug and confident. But as the evidence was presented, I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. The verdict was guilty, and Victor was sentenced to life in prison. As he was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. We had finally won, and we had finally found justice. I looked over at my grandson, who was sitting next to me. He was smiling, and I could see the relief in his eyes. We had done it, and we had finally found peace. As we walked out of the courtroom, I put my arm around my grandson's shoulders. "It's over," I said. "We're finally safe." My grandson nodded, smiling up at me. "Thanks, Grandpa," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." I hugged him tightly, feeling a sense of pride and love wash over me. We had been through hell, but we had made it through together. And as we walked away from the courtroom, I knew that we would always be there for each other, no matter what.